Someone you love is gone. The body is right there, and you have absolutely no idea what to do next. That feeling, that frozen, helpless confusion, is one of the most universal experiences in human history. But here is the strange part. Your ancestors felt it too. Every single one of them, going back hundreds of thousands of years. And what they did next will completely change how you think about grief, about meaning, and about what it actually means to be human. Because it turns out, the way ancient humans responded to death was not primitive. It was not random. It was not driven by superstition alone. It was driven by something far more surprising. Something that still lives inside you right now. Look around you at any modern funeral. The flowers, the gathering of people, the careful preparation of the body, the words spoken over someone who can no longer hear them. You probably assume these are relatively recent traditions, cultural inventions, maybe a few thousand years old at most. You would be wrong, by a margin of hundreds of thousands of years. In 2015, a team of scientists led by paleoanthropologist Lee Berger made a discovery deep inside a cave system in South Africa called the Rising Star Cave. What they found rewrote the timeline of human ritual behavior. Buried deliberately in a remote underground chamber that required squeezing through passages barely wide enough for a human body were the remains of a previously unknown species, Homo naledi. A creature with a brain roughly 1/3 the size of yours. And the bones were not scattered. They were not the remnants of predator activity. They were placed. Intentionally, carefully, in the dark. Homo naledi had no written language, no complex spoken language as far as anyone can determine, no religion in any organized sense. And yet something moved them. Some internal force, some recognition to carry their dead into the earth, to do something deliberate with the absence of a life. That recognition is older than your species. Think about what that means for a moment. The capacity to feel that a death requires a response, that a body deserves something more than abandonment, did not emerge with modern humans. It did not emerge with agriculture or cities or organized religion. It emerged in creatures whose cognitive architecture looked almost nothing like yours. Which means this impulse is not a product of culture. It is a product of something deeper, something biological, something baked into the very structure of minds that are complex enough to form bonds. Anthropologist Barbara J. King spent decades studying grief and mourning in non-human animals. Her research, compiled in the book How Animals Grieve, documents elephants returning repeatedly to the bones of their dead. Chimpanzees sitting vigil over the bodies of infants for days, sometimes weeks. Dolphins carrying deceased calves at the water's surface long after any hope of revival. She argues that grief is not uniquely human. It is a byproduct of love. And love, in the evolutionary sense, is simply what deep attachment looks like in a brain capable of forming it. Your ancestors loved. Therefore they grieved. Therefore they did something. But what exactly did they do? The archaeological record, when you read it carefully, tells a story that is both stranger and more moving than most people expect. In a cave in Shanidar, Iraq, a Neanderthal burial site was excavated in the 1950s by archaeologist Ralph Selecki. The bones of a man, clearly elderly, with a withered arm and evidence of severe injuries that had long since healed. Someone had kept this person alive. Someone had fed him, cared for him, helped him survive wounds and conditions that should have killed him. Around his remains, unusually high concentrations of pollen. Selecki's interpretation was bold. Someone had laid flowers on this grave. The flower burial, it was called. Decades of debate followed. Some argued the pollen was deposited by wind, by burrowing rodents. The interpretation remains contested. But here is what is not contested. The man existed. He survived with his disabilities for years. That survival required other people to choose again and again to carry him, feed him, include him. In a world where survival was the only currency, these people spent it on someone who could not fully contribute. That tells you something profound about what ancient humans valued, something that does not look primitive at all. Across multiple sites, spanning tens of thousands of years, a pattern begins to emerge. Bodies placed in fetal positions, ochre, red pigment rubbed deliberately onto bones and skin, grave goods placed alongside the dead, tools, jewelry, animal bones. Shells brought from coastlines dozens of miles away. At a site called Sunghir in Russia, dated to roughly 34,000 years ago, two children were buried head to head, their bodies covered in thousands of hand-drilled ivory beads. Someone spent an estimated 10,000 hours creating those beads. 10,000 hours for two children who would never see them. Why? What drove ancient humans to pour such staggering effort into the treatment of those who had already left? The answer that archaeologists and cognitive scientists keep returning to is this: ritual is not about the dead. It is about the living. When you perform a ritual, any ritual, you are doing something that your brain finds deeply stabilizing. Psychologist Christine Lagar at the University of Texas has studied ritual behavior across cultures for years. Her research shows that ritual action, even when people do not believe it has any supernatural effect, measurably reduces anxiety. It creates a sense of order in moments where chaos threatens to overwhelm the mind. Grief is chaos. The sudden absence of a person who was woven into your daily experience creates a rupture in your sense of reality. Ritual is the act of stitching that rupture closed. Not permanently, but enough. Your ancestors did not invent ritual because they had read a psychology paper. They invented it because it worked. Because the group that gathered together over their dead, that performed deliberate actions in the face of loss, that transformed chaos into ceremony, survived better. Grieved together rather than alone, stayed bonded when the loss of a key member might otherwise have fragmented the entire social group. Death, in this sense, was not just a biological event in the ancient world. It was a social crisis. And ritual was the social technology developed to survive it. Consider what a death meant in a group of 30 or 40 people living on the open savanna. Every person was a resource, a hunter, a gatherer, a memory bank of survival knowledge, a relationship, a bond, a thread in the web that kept everyone alive. When that person vanished, the web shook. The group had to reorganize. And the way ancient humans reorganized, the way they signaled to each other that the group was still whole, still connected, still capable of surviving, was through the shared performance of grief. The gathering. The preparation of the body. The objects placed alongside it. The sounds made together. All of it was communication. Not to the dead, to each other. We are still here. We remember who we lost. We are not broken. That message is still the same one being sent at every funeral happening anywhere in the world today. Look at what persists across every culture that has ever been studied. The body is not simply discarded. Some form of preparation occurs. People gather. Objects of significance are involved. Sounds are made. Crying, singing, chanting, prayer, and then there is a transition. A deliberate moment where the community acknowledges that something has changed and something must continue. The specifics vary wildly. Cremation, burial, sky burial, water burial, mummification, green burial. Elaborate ceremony or stripped down simplicity. But the structure underneath is always the same. Because the structure underneath is not cultural, it is biological. It is the ancient architecture of a social brain trying to survive an unbearable disruption. Anthropologist Thomas Suddendorf, in his research on mental time travel, the human capacity to project oneself backward and forward in time, argues that this ability is central to why humans mourn the way they do. You do not just experience the loss of a person in the present moment. You experience the loss of every future moment you had already, unconsciously, imagined with them. The conversations, the meals, the ordinary Tuesday afternoons that no longer exist. You grieve a future that was never real. And that capacity to lose something you never had is uniquely, devastatingly human. Your ancestors had it too. Maybe not to the same degree, maybe not with the same narrative complexity, but enough. Enough to carry someone into a cave and place them there with care. Enough to spend 10,000 hours making beads for a child. Enough to rub red pigment onto the bones of someone gone in a gesture that seems to say, "You were here. You mattered." The color of life still belongs to you. You do that same thing now. Every time you frame a photograph, every time you keep a piece of clothing that belonged to someone who died, every time you visit a grave and stand there, not because the person can hear you, but because standing there is the only thing that makes any sense. You are doing exactly what your ancestors did in that cave in South Africa, in that burial site in Iraq, on that Russian plain 34,000 years ago. You are performing the oldest ritual in human history. You are stitching the rupture closed. You are telling yourself and everyone around you, we are still here. We remember. We are not broken. Tonight, if you think about someone you have lost, notice what happens in your chest. That ache, that pull towards some action, some gesture, some way of marking the absence. That is not weakness. That is not irrationality. That is the oldest and most human thing about you, surfacing exactly as it was designed to, exactly as it is surfaced in every person who has ever walked this earth. The grief you carry is the same grief that built the first graves, and the fact that you feel it means the same thing it always meant. You loved, and love, in a brain capable of forming it, always leaves a mark.